Everywhere else, we're just going live now.
Okay. All right. We'll get
Cool.
into it. I'll do the intro.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Hello everyone, and welcome to another live episode of the Here I Stand podcast, a podcast produced by the Young Conservatives for Christ, also known as the YCFC. This podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So tonight we're excited to be joined by a very special guest, Rod Lampard from the Caldron Pool. We'll be talking with Rod about his work, current issues facing Australia, politics, culture, faith, and much more. It's going to be a great conversation, so make sure to stick around. So, firstly, Rod, thank you so much for joining us on the Here I Stand podcast. It's great to have you with us. And for those who may not be familiar with your work, could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of talking about my background. It's too, to be blunt, it's too traumatic to talk about. So I've written it up. It's on my website. You can go check it out. It's on the blog, rodlampard.com. It's in the about pages. Fragments there. Um, I mean, it's a cliche story, just to be really simple and sum it up. Drugs, alcohol, welfare cycle, government housing, um, everything. Yeah. So came to Christ in the gutter. Um, and eventually, had 5 kids and married and been that for 28 years and yeah, just powering on. So blessed, I guess, and seeing the grace of God transform my heart in a big way. That doesn't mean we haven't come up against struggles, and we certainly are faced with some of the same things that everyone else gets faced with. So it hasn't been a smooth sailing, but no cross, no crown, right? So um, we um, we submit every day, like every Christian should, the flesh. I mean, we've got to do that. We've homeschooled as well, so there's a big part of our life, 10 years plus, and we're just about the end of that, moving into another direction. So I've been working a lot more with the Canberra Declaration, Daily Declaration, and areas like that. So yeah. Oh, I also did a degree, so in theology and ministry, and then worked with Ben Davis for a while. We did that. I'm still with Ben, trying to do what we can. We were big on the anti-COVID stuff and learned a lot about the church as we went, and I guess even ourselves, yeah, again, that whole thing. So we'll be talking about secular and sacred, I think. So there's a big part of that, especially during COVID. And you see the sacred submitted to the secular, didn't even stand up for itself. So um, everyone screamed separation of church and state when there's no emergency. But then when there's an emergency, you've got to have, you know, the two together. So it's interesting because you look at COVID, both merged, and then outside that, you got people saying, like even Trump right now saying, oh, Hegseth and everything. You can't bring Christianity into here, prayer at the Pentagon. Oh, that's bad. Well, is it? Yeah. No, that's a
Oh,
really good point
mm,
because I think part of what we saw in COVID was the outworking of the theology that Christianity doesn't belong in the public square because it had no influence on what our COVID policies were or how important the church
yeah,
was in uh, just in general. And the fact that um, if anything, the church should be the last thing to close down, especially not for something that wasn't nearly as bad as it was brought out to be. And then the churches that split along the lines of vaccinated, unvaccinated, that was it was horrible to see. But that should never have been reality. It should have just been the church is always going to be open because the work of God is always an ongoing thing. And the fact that people can't make choices about what medical decisions they want to do. Like that was the horrible theology we saw on display. Um, it's a revelation of how weak the church was prior to that, and how much more we need to wake up in the modern age if we want to compete with the world. And
yeah.
we
I,
saw
I,
that.
I
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was weak. I'd say it was compromised.
Mm.
There's
Yeah.
still a lot of there's still a lot of power there. Still, I mean, the institutions still exist. They
Mm.
just have to be revived. They have to. The issue is, I think, that there's a lot of um, go along to get along.
Mm.
There's too much of that. We have a lot of that culture, I think, in Australia.
Just what is it, John Dixon's his affirmation, lose graciously or learn to lose well. Um, I disagree with that. And look, I love John and I love his work, especially his history work, and his books are amazing. But when it comes to politics, especially during COVID, no. I think he did what a lot of people did, and that was just surrender um, the dignity and the integrity of the church to bottlers, Bunnings, and brothels, because that's what they kept open as essential services. And you had pastors, some of them just stood up and they said, "Yeah, no, we're not tolerating this." A lot of the Presbyterians did that, which was great. But a bunch of them, then no. So what did they do? They went and threw out a bunch of spiritual abuse and slammed Romans 13 down everyone's throat without any regard for Romans 14 or any of the context of that whole entire Bible, a book, that letter. So, mate, I think we talk about the secular and the sacred. Like they combine the two. Everyone who says that should be separate outside of that situation, then put the two in. The church had to submit to the state, and that had no right or recourse for protest. And when you did, pastors were abused by even their own flipping elders. And that was wrong. That's not biblical.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an example. My daughter, my second eldest, she was going through um, a university group, and she was really enjoying the fellowship. COVID came around. She was refusing to get vaccinated, rightly so. And they started to gather again because they were all getting vaccinated. And I actually saw her pick up her phone, look at her message, the message about what was happening. And it literally said in the phone, only vaccinated people. And I saw the joy and the life just drain out of her, the light drain out of her. When I saw that, that's unforgivable. It really is. For Christians to treat other Christians that way.
100%. And I saw there's an Anglican church nearby me, and during that time, there's a lot of it's like got a lot of elderly people that go to this church, and a lot of them they come for a separate service on the Wednesday at 10 o'clock. And they were told unless you are up to date with your vaccines, you can't come to church. Like that's ridiculous. I couldn't hear it, especially for them when like it's hard enough to get to church. You can't get to church on a Sunday morning because it starts at 8 o'clock, so that's really difficult for older people. And to say you can't even come to a service where there's a less amount of people during the week when you could, if you wanted to, you could do the social distancing and the masks, and even though that's all ridiculous, to say that you can't come to church because you don't want to do a medical intervention that should be optional. Like that was shocking. I couldn't believe it. And then when any pastors would stand up, they wouldn't have anyone on supporting them. Like there was a pastor down here in Melbourne, Pastor Paul Furlong. He stood up, and I think he went to jail for a little while too because of his stand. But no other churches would stand up with him. They weren't like, "Oh, we're going to get behind you and we're going to support you and we're going to stand up too." Then it just shriveled up in compromise.
Yeah, it's I think that compromise there with with the state and the surrender, it was fear based. I think more than just fear, not fear of COVID, but fear of having the state's disapproval, fear of losing funding, perhaps, fear of
Yeah.
losing their charity status. It comes back to money, doesn't it, ultimately? And if that's the case, who are they serving? Certainly not Christ, is it?
Yeah,
Not the Christ. No cross, no crown, J.C. Ryle said in his book Holiness in 1889. That book, if anyone ever wants to read a book that's going to lift them up and encourage them, give them a good insight of how we should live today in this current age, this postmodern, relativist, subjectivist, um, you do you, I'll support you no matter what nonsense, of an age where truth is whatever you want it to be. No, I had a pastor tell me on the phone once when I called him to talk about an issue I had with somebody in his church. He said, "Oh, I'm not about wrongdoing. I'm just about love here." I kid you not. Now that's a postmodern pastor, and he's in the pulpit. It's all about your truth and their truth. It doesn't matter about wrongdoing. I guarantee you, if that guy had a thief come to his door, he'd be straight onto the police. He does care about wrongdoing.
Yeah.
It's inconsistent.
Yeah.
It's contradiction. There's no truth there. That's not scriptural. John, the apostle, he'd have a lot to say about that. In fact, he does if you read 1 John.
Yeah.
Mm.
The whole point of the gospel is to turn away from sin, not just, especially the ones that we are reticent to continue in. Not just the ones that we could find easy to stop, but every single sin. We have to pursue holiness. We have to become more like Christ every day, and to say, oh, because the culture thinks that this is okay, that we can just adapt to the culture. That's not the way Christianity has ever been. Christianity has always been countercultural. Literally, the start of Christianity, the Jesus said, it is, you've said that it's a sin for someone to commit adultery, but I tell you, if you look at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. That's a huge cultural change. It's completely against the culture. And so unless we stand against it, we're just not going to get anywhere.
Well, we wrote a lot of articles. Ben, myself, and even Matt Littlefield, and there was a bunch of others. Augusto Zimmerman. We stood up, and a lot of that was based on the belief that God is over government. But what we were seeing was government being put over God.
Yeah.
And God, these bureaucrats were starting to dictate to the church even what they could preach, what they could say. It was propaganda. This is Stasi, Gestapo era territory. This is tyranny.
Mhm.
And when you look at that, the culture, we talk about the culture and how does the secular and the sacred intersect? Where does it do? Where does it do that? Does it do that? I'd say yeah, it does. I mean, I give you an example. Uh, Paul talked about casting off and putting on. Right? It's a major theme in his letters. Cast off, put on. I mean, even Jesus uses it. Cast off, put on. What is it? Cast off, put on. Cast off the things of the flesh, put on the righteousness of Christ. William Girdle in the 1600s, he uses that the idea that for him the armor of God was Christ. That's the gospel. Jesus Christ is the gospel. The armor of God. We put on the armor of God. Now, if you have in the West right now, what you have is de-Christianization taking place. The only way to save the West is re-Christianization, because we're going to lose it to Islamification if we don't. Not only that, but we'll lose it to a Marxist dogma that replaces God with the state, which is in effect, you saw kind of what happened during COVID. You get a taste of that, right? Mandates. You have to take the vax or you lose your job. They don't care whether you disagree or not, whether you have an objection to it or whether you have looked at the stats or if you had a second opinion. You weren't allowed to get a second medical opinion. They're even silencing doctors. Look at the Fauci stuff at the moment, or Fauci stuff.
Yeah.
That's going on there. I mean, you see that, and you go, wow, you know what? The church has fell for this. These are the people who are supposed to be we're supposed to be the guards. We're supposed to be the watchmen. These are the prophets.
Yeah.
These are God's people. I mean, we're supposed to have these gifts. Where are they? Where's the patience? I mean, so come on. I mean, COVID was a horrible indictment on what the church really looks like and the hollowness of it. And not saying every church is like that. I'm saying, Commonwealth of Christ, broadly speaking, in the West. And you see that, I mean, I kind of saw it in 2017, the same-sex marriage debate. I was like, these people are in the church, like, oh, we've shifted a little bit on that, but hang on, what? You mean you can't shift that? The scripture says this pretty clearly. And what comes after de-Christianization? What have we seen? We're seeing docile population, apathetic voters, government dependencies rife, divorce is off through the roofs, even in the church. Now, I'm not saying divorce is in the domestic violence situation. or where there's manipulation and there's narcissism involved, I mean, they're bad stuff, right? And I'm 100%, I can say to you, if you look at scripture, God hates lies more than he hates divorce. And if you're going to break a covenant, then mate, you've broken that covenant. It's time to look into that and go, hey, either repent or let's get that thing fixed, right? Get your life in order and then maybe work it from there. So, um, we have to bring the culture back under Christ. So what does it mean? It doesn't mean theocracy. It means that we look at it, theonomy. We go, okay, well, we are all governed by a theology. That's atheist, that's agnostic. They're still governed by a theology. They're still, especially those two categories. I mean, they still live in the West. There's still a remnant of Christianity in our systems. Christ is still present in those systems. The Lord's Prayer in the Parliament, for example, they want to remove that. But de-Christianization, you're going to end up with worse, disease and doped up people. I mean, disease and dope up people. The government wants that. Why? Because they can weaponize welfare. They can put you on this system like the Matrix and say, hey, you're dependent on this. And if this group over here comes in like One Nation, or even if the Liberal Party wake up, hopefully they do, and say, well, we're going to have to cut this stuff, NDIS, RORTs, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, we want to end this hooked on handout culture because it isn't to the benefit of the people. It's to the benefit of the bureaucrats, the bureaucracy, the Leviathan that we're feeding with our taxes and our dependency on hey, we want them to take care of us. Daddy government, the net zero nanny state. And it's all, you see that climate grift of theirs. Look, no one believes that climate change is not a thing, right? How do we know it's not? The environments change. We live in a vibrant, dynamic world. It breathes, the earth breathes. It's just that habitable aspect of it. I think we can all agree on that. But when it comes to like COVID, you see what happens is the government steps in, manipulates it for the cameras, and suddenly they're profiting from it. The bureaucrats are profiting from it. They have more power. Oh, we need more departments to cover this. Look at Islamophobia, the so-called phobia, right? It's so-called mental illness because you criticize Islam, or it's racist. Now they're trying to blend those two things in. I mean, that's just about control. That's another false narrative that's been pushed out. So where's the church in that? The church calling this out? Where are the theologians? Where are the prophets? Where are these people who get up every Sunday, especially in the Pentecostal church, who get up every Sunday and speak in tongues and, wave their hands around, but then on Monday, they won't say anything about Albo. They won't say anything about, the hooked on handout culture in this country. They won't criticize. They're not saying everyone does that, especially in Pentecostal church. There's a lot of great people there. I know some. I'm just using them as an example, really, because they're the ones that are at the front saying, well, we've got the prophets and we've got the prophetesses and everything. Well, okay. Well, where's the hardcore, hardline stuff with this? It certainly wasn't around during COVID.
Well, yeah, it's a good point because most of the prophecy you see in the Old Testament was the prophets speaking against the people and the government of the day and saying, why are you doing this wickedness? Turn around while there's still an opportunity to do so. And we're not seeing that from the modern church.
I think it's against the culture, ultimately, that it challenges the culture because the culture's always in shift, right? It's always fluctuating. But Christ, in his word, stays forever. It remains forever. And that's the objective standard we hang on to. I've got a quote here from Albert Camus. I don't know if you guys know him. Ex-French communist. He wrote a book called The Rebel, which got him booted out of the communist clique in France. And Sartre was part of that. Sartre tried to get him to not publish the book, but he did it anyway because he saw what was going on in the hypocrisy, the double standard, stuff like that. Anyway, he said that systematic relativism, he's talking in the context of communists and leftists, systematic relativism leads to the death of intelligence and the oppression of the worker. So systematic relativism, so subjectivism, the postmodern thought, like truth is whatever you want it to be. And he's talking about how communists and leftists thrive on that kind of thinking. And this is a guy from within that group, right? This isn't someone, he's not a conservative. He's not that. I mean, he died in a car accident, which it's very interesting to go check it out. There's some theories about whether he was actually assassinated or not. So I would say That there's the amount of angst that they had towards him because he was exposing the rot within the French communists and the left. Um, he would make him a target for sure for cancellation. I mean, at that time, the Soviet Union was quite big, so I mean they would have the power to do that. I mean, I think his daughter, if you look it up, his daughter, I think, is adamant that he was killed. But yeah, I mean, he was, I think he was ahead of his time with that. So he wrote that in his as a part of his collection of essays. And there's another one he says where he says, "Whoever says that the sky is blue when it is grey is prostituting words and preparing the way for tyranny." Now you see that now. I mean, where is the sacred telling the secular, other than sort of, I mean, it's building. You got Joanna Howe and you got others, but where is that saying to the state, "Hey, abortion isn't healthcare,"
Mm.
right? Why are we treating conceiving a child the same as contracting an STD? Yeah, that's prostituting the language. That's mass manipulation, and then gaslighting everyone who says that that's a child isn't a conceiving a child isn't contracting the same as a disease, contracting a disease. Because you shout, you say this is where the prostituting language goes. The minute you challenge that, abortion is not healthcare, right? They're like, oh, you don't care about healthcare. The gaslighting, Darvo, just all these manipulative tactics. And these are the guys in power, man. And so I can understand why some of the pastors might want to talk about this kind of stuff because in a lot of ways they gotta pay their bills and put bread on the table too, and they might not want to have to go into a bivocational lifestyle because it's stressful being a pastor. So I mean, it can be really hard on them, but look, there's a lot of guys out there who are doing it tough. As pastors, put up with a heck of a lot of stuff. They need spiritual abuse from their own congregations. So, look, I think that at the end, when we talk about how COVID and the secular and sacred framing for that, I mean, I'd say that that was no excuse for surrendering the dignity, integrity of Christianity and the power of the gospel, the transformative power of the cross to the power of the state. And if you look at that, I mean, there's another thing that Camus says, or Camus, I think it's Camus, I'm pretty sure it is. What the world expects of Christians, he says, is that they speak out loud and clear. This is a guy who's, again, he's booted out of the clique, the communist clique, the French communist clique, and he's saying that Christians should speak out loud and clear. They should voice their condemnation in such a way that never a doubt, never a slightest doubt could rise in the heart of the simplest man. So he looked at Christians. He's like he admired Christianity, but he couldn't bring himself to become one because he saw he couldn't reconcile how children die in this world, and he just couldn't reconcile um the innocence, the death of innocence. It was too much of a struggle for him. And maybe later on, if he'd lived, maybe he would have come around to that and spoken to some of the more brighter apologists out there who are well schooled, well versed, well informed, and well read. But yeah, he goes on to say this: if Christianity insists on losing once and for all, and this is relevant to what we're talking about, more so than the rest. If Christianity insists, or Christians insist on losing once and for all the virtue of revolt and indignation that belonged to it long ago, the Christianity, Christians will live, but Christianity will die. And what we saw during COVID was exactly that. Christians were living, but Christianity was dying. De-Christianization.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you wrote an article about a speech from the ARC conference that's relevant to this that I'll bring up there if I could. Yeah, I can see that there. By Ian Hersey Ali, I think I've said that right. Which is very relevant that uh, Christianity, if Christianity is dying, then civilization itself is also dying because Christianity is the center of Western civilization. It's given us the morals, the values, the ethics, the justice system, everything that we use as our
Science, technology,
science,
everything.
technology,
Yeah.
mathematics.
Yeah.
Uh,
Time.
yeah, all of that comes down to
Mm.
that. The fact that atheists and agnostics have more uh in common with Christians than Muslims or Hindus or Jews have with Christians because of this backbone of morals and values that come from uh, the Christian ideal. And I'll just read a small piece of it. She was asked about counter arguments about problems in the West caused by hyper individualism, narcissism. And she said, I think that is a caricature of the system. It is true that individualism can lead to extreme selfishness and narcissism. But again, the Christian story, the Western civilization story, has the remedy for that. It is built into the system. Then you said, Rod, it comes back to the fear of God. These days, we fear everything else. Uh, we were checked by these biblical truths in every institution. Some form of accountability was built into it. And what we did was remove these layers of accountability by labeling them white supremacist structures. And I come back to that manipulation that you were talking about earlier, that um, ideas that people
Yeah.
don't like are reframed and made strawman arguments about them and said, like, for example, gender roles. Feminism is trying to destroy the idea that men and women have different roles in society that complement one another. And we're seeing that the result of that people would have never predicted, but they should have thought of, was now we have people saying they can be the opposite gender, uh, or that fathers don't matter as the parent as the leader of the household. Rather, it could just be the mother, and that's a good thing, not just a result of the fall, but that's actually a good intended purpose. Um, and so the idea that I think my point was uh, these good ideas have been manipulated by this idea of toxic empathy. I think that's a really important point. I think Ali Beth Stuckey's been good on this the past couple of years, talking about this idea of toxic empathy, that feelings are being weaponized to say if someone offends you, that you are committing violence against them, and that's a real idea, and that's shocking to me. But
Yeah,
yeah,
unfortunately, that ties into the whole idea. You look at trauma and you see some of the trauma. Like there's some books about it, but look into it because it's really important. We've lost the meaning of trauma, and they don't fully understand it truly. To be true about, it. I mean, they don't fully understand it, but you hear people often use it loosely now. Oh, I had a traumatic morning because my coffee was cold. You don't, that's not trauma, dude. Again, that's not trauma. The trauma is when you've been abused by your father, right? For years, or parental alienation, or you've got a parent who's been estranged, who's had their kids estrange themselves from them for no reason whatsoever. The
yeah.
heartache, the pain, ripping your heart out for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's trauma, right? That's real trauma.
Mm.
So the way we're using words, it comes back to what Cambridge was saying, the prostitution of the language.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
it's garbage, and we have to, and that's the postmodern. That's C.S. Lewis wrote an awesome essay. If you ever get a chance to read it, gents, check it out. It's called he says subjectivism is poison, and the whole thing is almost prophetic when you look at it. It kind of ties in. The theme of it ties in. It weaves in well with what Camus was saying, and we're already seeing that the cost of that, as you pointed out, the downgrade of men, fatherhood, masculinity, and that was already being warned about in the 90s. The crisis in masculinity, there was plenty of talk about that. Where was that coming from? Yeah, obviously, it was coming from radical feminism. Um, and then you see transgenderism, which is a byproduct of radical feminism. And I'm not pulling that out of a hat. You go read Gina Elstein's book, Public Man, Private Woman. She talks about that in detail, especially about the Marxist feminists and the cultural Maoist warriors who, unfortunately, like they're ruling now. They have the say, the power, and you know,
Mm.
like we're already seeing that. As I said, that with Kirralie Smith, Sal Grover, Lyle
Mm.
Shelton, and that I've called it a tyrannical degeneracy of the LGBT lawfare state because you're starting to see the downgrade, not just in masculinity, but also in like the whole definition of woman has been completely erased. Women have been, and that's the prostitution of the language, as Camus is talking about. So how does this tie back in with the secular and the sacred? Well, it's the church's responsibility to go, well, I don't care if I'm not going to be liked here by the state. I'm going to tell the state that this is the way, this is the truth, this is the life. John 14:6, right? The uniqueness of Christ and that image of God. We are made that man and woman are made in that. You're like, oh, you're bringing God back. Well, that's exactly the point, isn't it? We're talking about secular and sacred. That's the intersection. It's coming into discussion and conversation with each other because it can't exist separate. Secularism cannot exist without Christianity. They can say, oh, yeah, it can. No, it can't. Why? Well, you're going to live under a communist state? There were secularists in the communist state. There were degrees that were cleaning toilets because they weren't part of the state apparatchik. Roger Scruton says a lot about that stuff. Another guy, you read his stuff. The late Roger Scruton was a legend. If you read his stuff on how he used to reach out to the intellectuals in Eastern Europe, my goodness, it's eye-opening stuff. That and we talk about that de-Christianization. I mean, the armor of God, Ephesians 6. Okay, I did mention William Gurnall, and he talked about the armor of God being Christ, putting on Christ. If you're going to kick Christ out of culture, you're not going to have any armor. There's going to be no truth. There's not going to be a absolute or objective truth there. As you mentioned before, like shared culture, shared values. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think COVID was a trial run for that, and we really got a taste of what life would be like with a church that's either asleep in the light, as Keith Green said, full of compromise, or passionate for Christ and calling a spade a spade.
Yeah. And I think sometimes what frustrates me is a lot of Christians, when they're interacting in the public sphere, they try not to appeal to the Bible because they think, oh, people won't accept the Bible or Christian ideals. And they'll try to use secular ideas instead of realizing that fundamentally those ideas about human rights or uh, how we can collectively as a society decide that murder is wrong, or these ideas all fundamentally come back to the Christian idea. And so trying to win the war on which ideas are superior, um, which values determine how we should live, um, if people don't come back to Christianity as their foundation, and they're just going to be walking on sand, you can't. I don't think you can win an argument like that because you can say, "Oh yeah, don't you believe in human rights?" And then someone says, "No." What are you going to say then? How are you going to appeal to them without scripture, without God as the center?
Well, you look at
It
what happened. Yeah,
does.
go. Sorry.
I was going to say, sorry, there's just this cherry picking in the Bible, though, John. That's
Yeah,
one thing.
yeah.
I just thought I'd add that into it, but there's also the weaponization through cherry picking. But yeah, sorry, Rod, you go for it.
No, man. So you haven't said anything, so go for it. You tell us
No,
what
I've
you
just
think.
been taking it all in. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, so I was just going to say that the cherry picking is one of the biggest issues, and that's both sides of the the issue here. That's the church and the secular side. They're both cherry picking certain. Like one thing that comes to mind straight away is turn the other cheek. Do we
hmm,
turn the other cheek when it comes to abortion
hmm.
as a Christian? What do we do there?
Good.
And I think it's quite obvious what we should actually do when it
You
comes
know,
to
it's the
abortion.
interesting thing about that.
But
I think it's Matthew 5. I think Matthew 6, Matthew 5. The very interesting thing about that is it's often taught as if Jesus said, "Turn a blind eye," right?
mm,
I mean,
mm,
that's it's like that's how it's taught, and that's how you
mm,
read it, and the world comes back and quotes it back at you, just like the
mm.
judge, "Don't judge me, man." Jesus said, "Don't judge." What? Did you even know what that verse is all about? Like, okay, when Jesus
Yeah.
said turn the other cheek, he's talking about don't retaliate in kind, right? He said don't dish out to your enemy what he's dished out to you. In other words, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? That's contextual. That's
Yeah.
exegesis right there. That's not eisegesis. That's exegesis. That's not me telling what it is. That's the context. And I
Context.
think
Yeah.
that eisegesis is where the church gets it wrong. That's where we've got too much of that postmodern. It's my interpretation of this, or the hermeneutic, and therefore this is what I think it is. We go, hang on a sec, man. We got like 2,000 years of history that we can draw from. And this isn't just flippant. These are, you got intellectuals, we've got ex-atheists, we've got former pagans, we've got kings, and these guys wrote treaties, they wrote documents. We've got such a rich library to draw from. And if you get someone that are telling you that, like Camus said, that the sky is grey, blue, and it's grey, you know,
Mm.
Roger Scruton is very, very famous. I'm going to try and get this quite right because I haven't quite memorized it properly yet. But he effectively said, if somebody's telling you there is no truth, don't believe them. But because they're actually telling you not to believe them, not to listen to them. So because they're actually asserting an absolute, they're asserting a truth that there is no truth.
Yeah.
A contradiction. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of that that goes on. And I mean, look, we all have areas of like gaps in areas. We all have the blind spots. I mean, that's where we come back to spiritual discipline. We come back to checking our hearts. We come before the Lord and say with the publican, Lord, have mercy. One of the
Mm.
great awesome prayers of the Orthodox Church is, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that's part of their meditation. I think Alex, like that is the crux of where we're at. And this that applies to the state as much as it does everything else. Why? Because Jesus is king. That he is victor.
Mm.
He we and that's not interpretive. That's a statement of fact. And there's like atheists and all that. I think, oh no, you're still a man said it. Well, no, Jesus was very God, very man. Yeah, he is the way, the truth, not there. There's no way around it. And I know it for myself. How do I know that for true? Well, Keith Green, he very famously said when he was asked, "How do you know that God is true?" And so he proved it to me. I said, "Well, how?" He said, "Well, because he changed me." And I listened to that and I go, like, that's exactly how I feel because he changed me. Now, as I said, my story is too traumatic to recount. It would take a long time to even try and talk to you guys about it, and I wouldn't want to put any trauma on you guys for that. But you can read a bit about it on my page. I can just say from that I was destined for another life that was without Christ and probably an early death. So that was I wasn't raised to be successful. Let's just say that. And I've seen how the state rots people with its welfare dependency, with its addiction to handouts. I've seen how it rots people and it keeps them stuck in that cycle. And what we're seeing at the moment, what we're seeing is diabolical. The the import of people who are going to sit on welfare, the import and the neglect of the people who are already on welfare here, without them raising them up to empower themselves, which is the essence of the West. That's individual responsibility. That's what Ian was talking about. There are, I'm not sure if you saw the article. Konstantin Christian also spoke. He did the opening address to that, and he talked about liberty and liberalism, the difference between the two. And if you bring it up, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
What he's effectively talking about, and this comes into what I would say other people have commented on before, and I've read about it, that the abuse of the divine right of kings, which kind of birthed the Enlightenment in some respects, has become the abuse of the divine right of the individual. So hyper individualism, and that the difference between liberty and liberalism, it's right there. And I mean, yeah, if you see it there, Kissen makes a very good argument about progressivism and the difference between um, preserving what we have and destroying it through through that abuse of freedom and a
Mm.
denial of where that even comes from, which we know is through the Christ's victory on the cross, first and foremost. God's you know, I'll be your people, I'll be your God, you'll be my people, the covenant formula. As Christians, we can own that, we can present that with
Mm.
confidence, as it says in Hebrews 10. Hebrews 10 says, don't lose your confidence, don't hand it over. Right?
Mm.
That's the confidence we have in Christ. That's assurance. And that comes from holiness, that essence that I said that J.C. Ryle talks about. Even Sproul, he has a good thing on that. But I actually would recommend reading J.C. Ryle before his book Holiness, before Sproul's book.
Well, and I just thought of a quote as well, from the Rule of Saint Benedict. This is very different context, so
Yeah,
long
yeah,
time
yeah,
ago. But the first degree of humility is obedience without delay,
yeah.
and that needs to be across the board.
Obedience
That's
to obedience to Christ, the
yeah,
Word.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, not ourselves, not the flesh, not people pleasing someone over there. Galatians, Paul talks about people pleasing. If I'm here to please men, I'm here to please God. I'm here to serve Him and
Mm.
Him only. Yeah.
Yeah,
But he's yeah. Look, I think there's another thing that Gurnall talks about, and this is a quote from him, a direct quote. He says, "The Christless state is a state of ignorance." And if we
mm,
look at what we're usually talking about with secular sacred, with de-Christianization, the removal you say it start with the removal of prayer from schools, and people could argue that, and other things. There's this devaluation, and I get why. Um, there was a lot of abuse done in the name of Christ, and that still
yeah,
kind of happens today. I get why, and that's where that the two kingdoms that Martin Luther talks about comes into play to some degree. The state that is protected, so separation of church and state, or is not segregation of church and state, but because the secular and sacred, combined. And I know I'm kind of mixing secular with state and church with sacred, and I think that's fair. But um, when you look at Martin Luther's two kingdoms, one protects the other from itself. And there's governorship there, right? There's good government, and that's wielding the sword, and there's the church with the gospel. And there's a responsibility there, that there's a respect for each realm, but they are intersecting, and I think constantly talking to one another and checking each other. Otherwise, what you have is ideology determining what theology we read, what theology we preach,
yeah,
and you'll end up
yeah.
with a theology of glory, not a theology of the cross.
That cherry
So
picking
it's
once again.
exactly
Yeah,
right there. Yeah.
mm, yeah. Wow, and the only way to get back on track is through the church. The church has to step up. We can obviously push the church to do that, but to to what degree can we do that?
I think it comes back to what Gurnall said also, that labor to be sound rather than brave Christians. So it's individual. It starts with the family. The Puritans often said that the families should be like a little church. And I think the family unit's where it's going to start. So it starts in the homes. It starts with men stepping up and saying, I'm not going to have my family dictated to by tyrants. I'm not going to have my home. That's like COVID. You get that COVID thing come back in again. We have the 66 or $60 million going to an Islamophobia um, protection racket from Labor. I mean, we didn't consent to that. Nobody opposed it. I mean, I know I could probably One Nation, I think probably has. I haven't checked in on Malcolm Roberts on that one, but I'd say that there'd be some kind of dissenting voice there, maybe even Alex Antic. So we have really good representation in that regard, even though I think as far as One Nation goes, it's flawed. Again, because don't want to bring too much of the sacred into this, because it could hurt the vote or could hurt the polls. And then fair enough, but you want success, put it before God.
Yeah.
Bring the cross into it.
Mm,
Because Matthew 6:33 says, seek God. Right? Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Okay. Well, that should be the focus. It doesn't mean that you have to have a priest as a prime minister. Again, Martin Luther's two kingdoms. You even go to as far back as Augustine. Yeah. And like I read the City Guide through COVID, and I dug deep into that, and I didn't actually finish it because I don't know if you guys have seen how big it is, but it's a huge book. But you can call it piecemeal it, so you can read a bit now and then, and look maybe work it as a devotion or a spiritual discipline, and get into it. I recommend that; it's pretty good. But he said this: remove justice, and what are kingdoms but gangs of criminals on a large scale. I think of that. I think of Victoria. I think of communist China. I think of Soviet Russia. I think of the Democratic Party in the United States and some of the Republicans. Yeah. I think of the activist class. I think of the climate grifters. I think of the Bowen and his renewable push, which is risky as. But hey, you can question that, but he'll just deny that there are any problems with it, except for the fact that even homesteaders who use solar all the time still have to use diesel generators because they know, smart homesteaders know solar is good, but it's not the answer to everything. So, I mean, come back to Augustine and you look at even his stuff in the City Guide speaks to mass immigration. I don't know if you guys have looked into it, but the Coptic Solidarity guys who have been talking about the persecution of Christians in Egypt, and they're getting a raw deal. Egypt's constitution says there's freedom of religion, but Sharia is also in there, and Sharia is first. Sharia is honored before all those things. So you've got women who are abducted from their families. The families go to the police. The police just laugh at them. No, that woman wanted to go with that Muslim man and get married and convert to Islam. That's what they tell them. In fact, Coptic Solidarity a few years ago, 2020, they put out a report calling it jihad of the womb. It's that bad. And you look at what we're importing here, and without, if you question that, you're a racist. I mean, again, as it comes back to community, right? It's a prostitution of the language. And because we're Christians, so we're going to bring the sacred in that. Let's bring the Bible, let's bring the word into that. So no. This isn't a battle between left and right on this one. It's a battle between truth and falsehood. Yeah. Spirit of error, spirit of truth. This is John again, his letter. Augustine also says that, I mean, he was pretty blunt. He said that the false gods at the time, he called them the delusions of demons. I mean, this is 360 AD, right? This is, I mean, he's seen the fall of the Roman Empire, the disintegration. He's kind of witnessing that, and not incompletely, but he's witnessing the debauchery, the decadence, the ignorance. And he even says this: as stupidity glories in never yielding to the force of truth, that it is how it affects the ruin of anyone who is under the dominion of this monstrous moral fault. That's pretty powerful stuff when you think about how you apply it to our culture, our government. Stupidity. And he goes on here, it is wrong for men to worship demons. We should free ourselves from their vices. We talked about men stepping up. This is Augustine giving us permission to say, hey, we can wage just war on that. Does that mean blood in the streets? No, not necessarily. Maybe, like Musk talking about civil war. This is serious stuff. I mean, I'm not advocating for violence at all or inciting that. I'm pointing out that if truth isn't brought back into the public realm, and I'm talking objective morality, the word of God, I'm talking the sacred, isn't allowed back in to talk to the secular, the way that it's structured in the West, which is Christianity, the church and the state, we're in for a hell of a ride, and it's not looking pretty. We're already seeing that, like I said, with the tyrannical degeneracy of the LGBTQ lawfare state. Kira Smith, $95,000.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think the UK And the US, they're on the verge of a tinderbox, to be honest. With the UK with the Muslim immigration, and we got to see a bit of that with the Channel 7 interview with Pauline Hanson, where it doesn't even look like England anymore. It looks like another country. It looks like an Asian country. It looks like India or Pakistan. Um, and
I
and
guess it depends on where you go. And I'm sure
yeah,
that the left would get out there with cameras and say, like where Jeremy Clarkson is. I'm not sure if you know who Jeremy is. Yeah, top
yeah,
news.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Clarkson's
Yeah.
on.
yeah, yeah.
So you go to where he is. I mean, you see a lot of there's going to be a lot of Celts out there, and now it's like, oh look, there's no mass immigration problem here. So they avoid Luton, where Tommy Robinson's from, right?
Yeah.
Um, they won't go in that direction. Like here, they preach against ethnocentrism, and yet we've got two flags behind the Prime Minister of Australia, which are
Yeah.
ethnocentric. I mean, you can't have it both ways,
Yeah.
right? We have this is the problem here. You have that they end up with that two-tier system, right? And the double standards or the selectivity there, like during COVID, to come back to that with the church, uh, essential services were Bunnings, bottle and brothels,
Mm.
not places of worship. Pastors were put to the side, and some of them let that happen. They said, "Oh yeah, no, social distancing. We'll have Zoom church." Okay, good. Like I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. Ultimately, you're connecting, but when it replaces
Yeah.
something, and it's how it's done,
Yeah.
that's the problem. That is the issue because you have again, like I said, the church, the sacred, surrendering itself to the secular and being subsumed into that as a servant.
Yeah.
Not cool.
And that two-tiered uh sort of idea that's gone beyond laws into culture itself. Um,
Yeah.
and I see this fundamentally on a day-by-day basis at work. You sort of know who you can say what with and what you can't say what with. And sometimes I'll say something and I'll be like to people that are edgy in the culture's eyes that if I say it, if I say something, then I'm going to get criticized. But if a Muslim said this, they wouldn't get criticized. They'd be like, "Oh, good on you for standing for your religion and for representing your cultural ideas." But if I say that as I think someone summarized it from work who's not a Christian for me. She said, "You're a white Christian heterosexual male." If I say that and skip all the circle of intersexuality, then I'm going to be the one that's going to be sued or taken action against or even just blacklisted in a workplace or a public sphere. So it's gone beyond that political side into the actual culture itself.
May I add on top of that, we live in this world where we have to pick our audience. We can't say
Yeah,
certain things around people. This was exactly the same as a society like Nazi Germany, where the
Yeah.
kids would go off to the Hitler Youth, they would get indoctrinated, they come home. If their parents or their family said anything critical of Hitler or the Nazi Party, they would get in trouble by the state. The SS would come over, the SA, whatever, and they would deal with the problem. We live in a dictatorship where Christians are suppressed. This is what I write about it, and I think that's where I stand on this. I don't know. What do you think, Rod?
I don't know if I'd say we're in a dictatorship yet. I think, I think it, I think, look, I think the bureaucracy cares too much about the profit it's making um,
Mm,
from the freedoms that we have and abusing those freedoms by limiting and restricting them. I think we are definitely on that trajectory. And I think COVID definitely dictatorship, right? You're right there, medical dictatorship, unjustified completely, copied from communist China, where the thing started from anyway. And there's a lot of, I would say, you look at the Hong Kong pro-democracy riots, you look at Trump's re-election in 2020. I mean, look, it's all too convenient that it just suddenly appeared. I think there was a lot of back scratching there. A lot of people were in on board that perhaps. I mean, I know I'm being conspiratorial, but look, it's an interesting thing to discuss and say, well, hey, because those pro democracy riots in Hong Kong were squashed. People were put in jail. They even changed the law. And they use COVID as a cover for that. So it was very convenient. COVID benefited the Communist Chinese Party big time. And you go, okay, we know who benefits, right? You question that. Who benefits? That's the job of the church.
Yeah.
Step up. Who benefits here? I don't care if we're going to lose money. The truth matters. It's Christ or chaos. That's something that Ben and I and a lot of the guys at Caldron Pool, even Daily Declaration, stood by. And we still hang on to that, not for personal gain, but for the cross. For the cross. Why? Because Christ is all and in all, it says in Colossians. And at the end of the day, that's who we're accountable to. So you guys are accountable to. And as a father of 5 kids, I'm accountable to the Christ, not to someone with an opinion about what they think of me as a father. I'm accountable to Christ. You have to surrender decisions after, and that's the thing. Men stepping up. You're accountable to Christ. In fact, I'd be as bold as to say that being under Christ is far more important than being under a pastor, because that pastor should be under Christ as well. I think one of the big problems we have in the church is you have people who are married to the pastor, and that's not fair to them. Not fair to them. That's not their job. They're there to preach the gospel. They're there to instruct. They've been trained, and they've worked hard to get there, to do that. And they deserve that respect. They're not a nanny. Right? They're not there to create a safe space for feelings. Right? Like, seeker sensitive. You guys remember that? Did you guys know about that? Seeker sensitivity, where about that? No? Okay.
Oh, like just the general sort of movement of the evangelical church. Is that what
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of Bill Hybels and a few others in the 90s came out with this. And I guess it sort of came from the 80s, but yeah, a lot of compromise in that. I mean, I get contextualism. I understand that, especially from a missions point of view, because natural law and God's law, you find it present in cultures, not necessarily religions, and certainly not Hinduism, but you find it. And so finding that ground is important, but you can't sell out the gospel when you do that. You do that, what's the point? And so as men of conviction and Christian conviction, we're not being legalistic about this. We're not fundamentalists in the sense of, hey, we're going to go blow people up because they don't agree with us. And that's not Christian radicalism. Christian radicalism is telling people about the gospel. It's about Jesus Christ, what he's done for us. As I said, how's God proved himself to me? He's transformed my life. Now, I've lost some family, I've lost friends because I held on to the cross. I chose Christ over chaos. And that's happened throughout my life. And I come back to the pastors and how they struggle with the same thing. They choose Christ and they turn up, but they're beaten down. The state's against them. Some of the people in the church are against them. I mean, there's a thing called parasocial relationships. I don't know if you've heard of this, but social media has created this environment and where people have relationships with people online. They don't know them from a bar of soap, right? You guys like, Van Halen? Yeah, Ben. Come on, guys. Van Halen, jump. All right.
50-50.
I'll have to send you some videos or some stuff on Spotify. But
You have to convert us.
okay, big 80s band, Eddie Van Halen, probably one of the top guitarists in the world. By the way, if Steven Severa is watching this, ask him, send him a message or something like that. Get him on and he can have a chat to you about Van Halen. He's an expert in that field. So anyway, yeah, big band. His son, come back to the parasocial relationship. So his son Wolfgang, he put some stuff up on Instagram, and people were telling him they're ripping into him about his wife, saying his wife's only with him because he's famous. He's son of a famous guitarist, right? And then he fired back, basically saying, I don't, and he used expletives in that. I don't care about you or your opinion. And this people are saying, we care about you and we only want to look out for you. I don't know you. I don't care about you. So what he was trying to say there, I guess, is something like, you know what? He's identifying that parasocial relationship. And a lot of I think a lot of parishioners have that relationship with the pastor, and it's unhealthy. It's like, what your relationship and your commitment is to Christ first and foremost. You're under Christ, and you bring yourself under Him. Your household comes under Him, and then the church comes into that play because you're part of the body of Christ. But Karl Barth, one of the guys, we talk about Germany. He was booted out of Germany because he refused to sign the Hitler Oath. He was working at university at the time, so he understood from a very personal perspective the cost of choosing Christ over chaos. And he said that, I'm trying to remember it clearly. Um, yeah, I've forgotten now, but yeah, his life in that example really speaks to what we're talking about as far as the church stepping up and challenging the state in that regard. As far as the pulpit goes, I mean, the confessing church came out of that, come up in it, but even the confessing church struggled against the German Christians. You had those two camps. One was compromising with the state and was trying to hold on to that. Bonhoeffer was part of that, the confessing church. And yeah, it got pretty ugly. I mean, you guys talked about the universities and the kids. Look up Sophie Scholl. Look up the White Rose movement. They were beheaded, brother, sister, and friend. Why? Because they challenged the state. All I did was throw pamphlets around, challenging the the deification of the bureaucracy and the deification of the state. Again, that is the sacred bringing and doing his job and confronting the secular with the word of God and saying, "You are not God. God is God, and we are not."
Is the quote you were looking for, is that in here somewhere?
No, he helped write that, but no, I've forgotten it. So
All right, that's right. I thought I'd find it, but yeah, no. So good.
yeah, I mean, Hitler hated pastors. He just thought that irritated him because, especially the ones that challenged him. Like one of the first guys to be euthanized by the Nazis was a pastor, Paul Schneider, and that's because he refused to toe the line. He refused to comply. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the Nazis are overplayed, overused. I think it's
Hmm.
I think we need to talk more about Mao as far as what's relevant to our culture, Maoism and the Cultural Revolution, um, because the culture, what is it, cultural Marxism, the culture war. I mean, look at the left; like they've waged this war for decades, and they've got the hide to sort of gaslight us as saying that we fight that. There'll be some people in church. We're actually talking about culture war here. No, we're not. We're talking about Martin Luther. We're talking about divine right of kings and how it's become the divine right of the individual and the abuse of it. We're actually talking theologically about some really important issues, and we're bringing together Augustine, even a ex-French communist, to discuss that and bring that to bear. I'll even quote a feminist, right? One of my favorite Lutheran thinkers. She, as I said, mentioned earlier, she wrote a book called Public Public Man, Private Woman. It was her tone, basically, you know. So she said this when discussing Machiavelli. She said, Christian restraint likely leads to more, not less, destruction and cruelty over the long run. So when Christians are silent, look what happened in, yeah, even in, I guess, communism, under communism. Um, more destruction happens at the end of the day. And this is that comes back to the whole weak men. What is it, that quote? Weak men create. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it sort of feeds into that. And I guess there's another quote from her that says this, that when we start to regard ourselves in our own light, our light dims. I think that's when the sacred forgets the secular, and refuses to have a conversation with it. Say, hey, we're great because of this. We're great because of, and we had a great civilization. We have a great civilization because it's founded on what, like Ian said, the cross. It's founded on the Christ. It's founded on biblical morality, objective biblical morality. Now, there's also natural law that comes into there, which comes from some of the great thinkers in the Enlightenment. And I guess you can see that produced the fruit of that's produced through the American Revolution, and I mean, I guess even there you look at nuance, the idea of nuance. It's important when you're speaking academically about stuff. But I'm convinced narcissists in structures have weaponize nuance. Because as I was reading a book called The Elements of Journalism, in that it's a revised edition, fourth edition. It was published in 2021, the update. It's way out of date, especially if you consider what's going on with Fauci at the moment. But they make some assertions about COVID and stuff, which are completely wrong. But in that, they talk about the importance of journalism and how journalism is designed to empower people to govern themselves. And we say, well, how does the church fit into that? How does the sacred fit into that? How does it fit into, well, we're actually talking about it right now. Yeah. What governs that? What is truth? Where do we find our moral standard from? Where is that backbone? Where is the church's backbone? Where is their compromise? And those questions I think are important to ask.
Definitely. And I found that quote that you were mentioning by G. Michael Hoff. It says, "Hard times create strong men.
Yeah.
Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times."
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's certainly biblical that the testing of our faith produces endurance. When it says that our works will be tested under fire. So I think, especially with the times we're seeing now with the welfare state, things are very cushy for us now, and we haven't had to stand up for a while. And now the culture is moving, and so we've got to make sure we're standing up against it. Like I've heard this spoken by many cultural commentators over the past decade or more, or somewhere in there, that it'd take a third world war for people to wake up. I mean, for people to realize that there is gender roles, and that it's good that when men stand up, and that we need Christ at the center, not just another worldview.
The problem with that thinking is, who's going to go and fight that war? Not the minority groups, mate. It's going to be you, me, my sons, your mates. And what for? So that the bureaucrats can sit at home and just get fat even further? No, I mean, come on. If we're gonna fight for our nation, then give us something to fight for. Remind us of who we are. Stop telling us that we're racist. Stop telling us that our ancestors were racist. Stop telling us that they stole the land. Stop doing that. The state has to stop that. If they want us to do something like that, to stand up, to join up and defend, and there's no way I'd want that right now, especially not under this government. And I mean, look, wars have a way of changing whole entire geographies. The geopolitical landscape can change overnight in big ways. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a defense force or that we shouldn't have people joining that defense force. I think we need to be prepared to fight just wars when and where they are necessary. But that is the last resort. Violence, especially for Christians, is a last resort. It's got to be carefully discussed and thought through. I'm not a pacifist. As C.S. Lewis argued. Yeah. That's another good essay if you get a chance to read it. Why I'm not a pacifist. Very good. And I would say that this comes back to Gernall's stuff about the armor of God. Christ being the armor, we put Christ on. His righteousness, we wear that. We put on. That's the West. Yeah, it's the identity of the West. You can call it the Christian West or whatever. I mean, it's a derogatory term now on the left. So it does it again. The prostitution of language, right? Good is evil, evil is good. That's what happens. It's wrong, and we should call that out too. We should be defending the greatness of what we've achieved and what our countries and cultures have achieved, not deriding it, not pulling down our statues. Not letting the left do that. And the church should be saying, hey, you know what? No, hang on a sec. No. Because a lot of these guys were Christians. Yeah. They John Oxley, Christian, Captain Cook. I think we wouldn't have what we have if it wasn't for them plowing forward and pioneering what they pioneered. That doesn't mean that bad things didn't happen. It doesn't mean that there's no place for discussing that. There is, and it has to be for sure, because sin has to be identified and has to be confronted. That's part of reflection, part of humility, part of repentance, reconciliation. I mean, I think that word's been abused too. You talk about prostitution of language. Far out. I think we're beyond that now, aren't we?
Yeah, well, it's 100%. And I think to that point of prostitution of the language, they've literally rewritten our history to tell us that everything that's been done in the past has been bad, and we're so progressive and we're so smart now that we wouldn't do those things now, or that there was no good among the white settlers. Even today, I went to go see the Odyssey, which is a shock for me. Um, and I'm not into Greek mythology, and I know hardly anything of it, but it's generally understood that Odysseus, I believe it is, that the stuff that he did they were written about favorably, whereas in the Odyssey, uh, it portrays it as most of the stuff he's done in his life as negative. And I think that's the way history, especially Australian history, and I'm sure other Western countries as well, that anything that's happened in the past, any interactions we've had with the Aboriginals, has been negative. It's been bloodthirsty, and history tells a very different tale. And Riley, you can certainly speak to that because you know a lot more about history than me.
Yeah, I think it was 97% of human enlightenment and innovation occurred in Western Europe in the medieval ages and an early modern period. Without Christianity, without that structure, that foundational structure, we wouldn't have 97% of what they had developed. Oh, my camera's just frozen halfway through. There we go. Yeah, so we wouldn't have that. So I think that it's absolutely it's criminal to generalize Western Europe as being this almost this devil of the world that has colonized and brutalized the entirety of the world. Of course, there's no perfection outside of Christ, and Christians are not perfect. We have committed sin in the past. We have atrocities we have blood on our hands, of course. Um, but they, once again, they weaponize that and they cherry pick that and emphasize that rather than all the positive aspects of it. But yeah, that's where I would stand on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that it's called revisionism.
Mm.
And if you ever get a chance to, again, there's another good book to read. Modern Fascism by a guy called Gene Veith, another good Lutheran. Um, Great thinker, awesome guy. And he in that talks about revisionism and lines it up with the left. And I guess he does a bit of what um Horowitz does. And he passed away like I think last year or something. But there's David Horowitz, and he does some great work in exposing, because I mean he David Horowitz, not Gene Veith, I don't think came from that category, that background, but Horowitz did. Horowitz talks about how he was part of the Black Panther movement in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And he witnessed them get away with murder, and which is the thing that triggered him and pushed him towards conservatism. He was Jewish, but um, that didn't get in the way, right? He um, he then fought for a very long time to expose the double standards and hypocrisy. One of those he talked about was when um, the war movement, which he was a part of, the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, he saw inconsistencies in that. They all protested the deaths at the time, the American imperialists, um, fighting that. When the ceasefire was put in place and the North Vietnamese started to honor it, South Vietnam would be okay, and the Americans pulled out. The North Vietnamese came in, broke the treaty, wiped out, slaughtered people. The anti-war movement disappeared. They didn't care about the slaughter of the North Vietnamese slaughtering the South Vietnamese or the camps. If you read Horowitz's recount of how he felt at the time, it's pretty impactful. You look at it and go, wow, this guy, he witnessed that, he lived that, he was part of that, and he saw the double standard in it. And that drove him to spend his entire life trying to expose and shed light on this lie that exists within the left, and they are about liberation. They're not. They are about progress. They're not. I think some of them are well intentioned in that regard. And I'm not saying the right is perfect at all. And I know I'm using the left-right metaphor, but really, I think what Horowitz sort of comes back to, and that's what I tried to point out earlier, is that this isn't about left, right, up, down, black or white. This is about truth versus falsehood. And that's something we try to point it out during COVID, that we just want the truth, and we want to be told the truth, and we want to be respected politicians to look at us and respect us enough to say that you're intelligent enough to make your own mind up here. Instead, we got gaslit, we got slogans, 3 to 5 second bites, and threats. If you don't do this, you're going to lose this. And again, what is the church lie in that? Where is the church? Well, the church is the biggest thing. The church is speak the truth in love. Paul talks about this. Cast off, put on. Christless conservatism is doomed. It's like Christless Christianity, right? It's a shell. There's nothing to it. There is no life in it. There's no the Holy Spirit in there. What you have is people not falling in step with the Holy Spirit. People falling in step with the spirit of the age, the zeitgeist. And you get in Germany, look at the Red Guard and Mao's Red Guard, who he turned on. You're all these kiddie Marxists at the time. What, Maoists? The Red Book, the Red Guard. Get rid of the olds. Kill the rightists. Take them out. And then he turns on them. Just like Hitler turned on the stormtroopers. The SA. Mm. And that's interesting. LGBT element in that too, which probably won't go into because I don't want to lose.
We don't want to lose that. I'm aware of that. So yeah.
It's crazy, but no one talks about it. You're not allowed to speak about that because no, they were in concentration camps too. Okay, well, actually, they were some of the fiercest and most fanatical Nazis until Hitler. One, I think it was Veith actually. He said that, and he's talking a bit about that in modern fascism. He says that they became too powerful for Hitler. They became too powerful, and he saw them as a threat.
Yeah. That was the night of long knives, was the suppression of.
Yeah, mate, that's right. Look, there's a lot of anyway, there's a bit of a sidetrack there, but you look at it doesn't really go into the secular sacred conversation, but it does speak to, I guess, today we have wolves in sheep's clothing pretending that they are something they're not.
Yeah.
And usually for profit, personal gain. And they will make false accusations. They will tear into something that's good, put it down, and then tell everybody it's bad. And unfortunately, lies spread like wildfire. The truth is very hard to hold on to and present to elevate. As everyone learnt through COVID, the doctors who are trying to speak out, Black Lives Matter. I mean, look, we talk about Horowitz and contradictions and double standards on the left. Look at COVID there. I mean, Black Lives Matter. You could protest. You can't gather to protest the mandates. That's a super spreader, right? Come on now. What's going on there? Look, I think it's good that Dave Hughes is waking up a bit. I think I don't know if he's fully jumped ship yet, but I hope he does, right? Because he's seeing what a lot of us saw during COVID as well. I mean, we kind of had this idea beforehand anyway, because we didn't fully trust the state. We look at what happened to Trump in 2016. Crossfire Hurricane, the lies, the Russiagate hoax. I mean, the whole thing. That was ridiculous, man. And you're like, we're expected to believe that. You start questioning it, and then suddenly you're censored, you're shadow banned. Oh, I'm serious. I'm still certain we're still fighting shadow bans on social media. And I think it's just an algorithm thing. I think it's just you're saying the things that we don't want to hear. Because I mean, as I don't know if you read the Colin Lilly article that I wrote, which was a really good conversation with Jacinta Price's husband. It was an awesome conversation. We had a good chat about things, and we shared our testimonies. I mean, I have very similar kind of background. Um, but he said one of the things he said were really, I think, really hit home there is that honest people are threats to dishonest people. Dishonest people don't like them because they make them feel. Dishonest people don't like honest people because they make them feel uncomfortable. Those are the church. We're going to make the world feel uncomfortable when we speak and preach the gospel. We're just like, oh, yeah, when God is love, okay, this is where Sproul comes in. Sproul would say, hey, you know what? Okay, yeah, God is love. But first of all, we're going to say God is what? God is holy. Yeah. God is holy. And who can stand before him? Christ. And us wearing that righteousness of Christ. Putting on, casting off the armor. I mean, one of the things Gernal says, that's a really good quote, and I'll share it with you guys. Use the means appointed for our defense and not rush into naked into battle. So what do you mean is that we have the means, the church has the means. We have 2,000 years of history. We have Christ, we have beyond that, we've got the Pentateuch, we've got the prophets, we've got all of it speaks today. All of it reaches us. And there's a great cloud of witnesses must be looking at us going, the heck are they doing? Yeah, Bonhoeffer, I think with Ian, like I said to someone the other day, I thought it was really, really important because I think Ian Hersey is our generation's Corrie Ten Boom. And I don't think that's an overstatement. I definitely think she is. And she's certainly become that to me anyway. And every time I read anything she has to say or anything she's written, I'm like, wow, you know. She's a lot more blunt and political than Corey ever was. But for Corey, Christ was victor, Jesus was victor. And that governed her life. And even her ability to speak into the public realm. And I think that has to govern ours. Be fearless, be unashamed, and stand for Christ, stand for the gospel, even if it makes people around us uncomfortable. I wrote a piece yesterday on Keith Green, 44 years ago. He died in that plane crash. And one of the things that someone had used the word to describe him as tactless. And I actually don't think he was tactless. I think he spoke in a way that comfortable Christians didn't like hearing. I didn't like it because it challenged them and their hypocrisy and their lukewarmness to get up, get out, and go. And that starts with loving our families. That starts with being good dads. It starts with, for men, for women, being good moms, regardless of what the state says. We can't abandon, and this is one of the things about the homeschool world that I found attractive, is you don't abandon your kids to the world. You have a vocation as a father. And I bring a bit of Lutheran theology in here, right? You have a vocation. And Roman Catholicism is probably part of that too. You have a vocation, the fatherhood vocation. You're a father as a husband. You have a vocation as a husband. We've lost the richness of what vocation means. The church has a vocation. The Christian in Parliament has a vocation. And look, we've got some great people, as I pointed out before, in representatives. We have some woeful representatives who are tremendously bad when it comes to being honest and respecting what respecting the office that this country gave them, not just through a vote, but through the heritage that they have been handed to be stewards and caretakers of. You don't get the keys to the house and then go burn it down. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Why? Because the dead, cold, bony fingers of Karl Marx still pointing into society today, even though it's been proven to be garbage. Yeah,
100%.
God isn't dead.
Yeah.
And it's funny that people think uh, that they can have the morals of Christianity without Christ himself. The people think they can have the fruits of the tree without the tree. That somehow the fruits just magically appear when they want them to appear. I think it was funny that I think it was last year. What's his name? Richard Dawkins. He said he was a cultural Christian because he likes
Yeah,
all the hymns and I was doing some research at the time and I found he actually said the same thing about 15 years earlier. That he's a cultural Christian.
yeah, well,
Uh, And it's a funny point because his whole life he said, "Oh, who would serve a God like this? I would never serve such a monster." And he said other things, I'm
yeah,
sure even worse. But yet he recognizes that there's beauty and there's truth in the hymns, in the church buildings. Uh, yeah, there's some sort of there's certainly a contradiction there that I think some conservatives are starting to wake up to now. I think here in Australia, I've seen in the online space, some popular conservatives have become more conservative and more moral, and some have started to turn to Christ, which has been great to see, and I hope that becomes a permanent thing, not just a trend that we'll just hop on the Christ train while it's popular, and we'll hop off when the cultural zeitgeist changes against our favor.
yeah. There's a really good quote from Augustine about that. He says this, and I did write it down, so it's actually fits quite well. He says this: "Do not think that a city is fortunate when its walls are standing, if its morals are in ruins.
Mm.
Do not think that the city is fortunate if it's still standing, but its morals are in ruins." Okay, what hey, what governs that? Again, objective morality, yeah. So we come back to the cross, we come back to incarnation, you come back to covenant. God is God, we're not. And if our society, I think it's gonna be a reflection of the home. I think it's gonna be a reflection of the family. And you're gonna have that, like the de-Christianization that started this divorce, dysfunction, docile voters, dependency, disease. And look, the bureaucracy wants that. It has to, because why? Because it benefits from that daddy government dependency. They go, the parents can go do what they want, but the government will take it. Look at daycare, for example. You know, it's 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 I think it's hard because you see that, and I have some sort of insight into that. You see even in that this takeover of kids' minds, and even the government taking over the parents' role in those kids over those, that vocation is being violated. To quote Vieth, it's being violated, and we as this kind of, she'll be right, mate.
Yeah.
No worries. We'll just trust the government because surely they're not bad. Um, we'll just replace them down the track. Now you got a bureaucracy behind those faces who often tell them what to do. I don't know if you saw the piece I wrote about not Theresa May. Um, I can't. Anyway, was the a really, yeah? It's on the Caldron Pool Substack, and she talks about um it, she's a prime minister for like 40 days in the UK, and she talks about how she didn't realize until she got in there that she didn't have any power. It was the machine behind her that had the power and it was telling her what to do. When she tried to change things and bring things bring change, like we're talking about immigration, talking about cutting the handouts. Um, and I'm not saying that we're against any kind of social safety net, right? When I say hooked on handouts, what I mean by that is that there is a mindset, a dependency mentality that's been cultivated by politicians to keep people voting for them. And that's not empowering, that's enslavement. So yeah, anyway, yeah, if you could find it on there, the Substack, cultural Substack, talk about it. She's
Do you
got
know
some
what
great stuff to say.
do you know what the title was?
Nah, forget.
Oh, okay.
And that dependency issue, that's similar to the immigration, right? They're mass importing votes. It's similar in that regard.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say so. Yeah, I think that you look at what Biden was doing with the border in the United States, that was deliberate. You
mm,
can't say that they weren't concerned about terrorism. You can't say that. What they knew that Biden probably wasn't going to win the next election. They knew that Trump was probably going to come in. So they're like, let's stack the deck. Let's do what we
mm,
can to make that happen. But the
mm,
Americans, and they're a lot more spiritually alive than we are. I mean,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
hard not to envy that. You look at
Yeah.
them and you go, wow,
Mm,
you go, wow, wow. See, like some of the stuff that you see, look at their 250th anniversary. So they got a lot of problems, right? Yeah, no worries. Okay, we can put that out there. But again, look at, if you go like nuance, let's get into nuance. I've got a lot of problems. Like I said, that narcissists have weaponized nuance. Look at balance, right? And when I was talking about this book about elements of journalism, well, actually, good thing they say in that is that you can get too obsessed with balance that you end up saying nothing at all because you're only trying to appease dishonest critics. And so, what's the point of writing it? You just don't say it, you just give up. Spurgeon has a great analogy of that, and I'll do my best to honor it because it's, I'm going to probably shred it. But anyway, he goes. He talks about a man and his son take a donkey to market. Along the way, they're walking the donkey, it's packed with stuff, and they meet someone who says to them, "Why is the donkey carrying the stuff? That's not good. That's not right." And they go, "Okay, we'll carry the stuff." So they carry the stuff, meet someone down the track. Why aren't you riding the donkey? You should be riding the donkey. That's, it's a job. So, okay, hop on the donkey, ride the donkey. This kind of thing happens. It goes on and on to the point where they get so frustrated, they throw the donkey in the ditch. They don't even get to market because they've listened to all these different voices, different opinions, and they've been influenced by all this stuff that they're confused. They don't even know why they were heading to market in the first place. So I think the point with the balance can be, it's not it can be an anti-virtue, it can be a vice. And in the sense that, well, sometimes you got to say it what it is. I mean, post-millennial, they're probably one of the bluntest, you know, some would say sensationalist or clickbait that I actually look at. And um, I think that there's, I'm not going to say that clickbait's right. I don't think that's what I would endorse, but I think that we have to identify the fact that we're being and have been, especially conservatives and Christians, paralyzed by political correctness in the sense that we've had to feed this nuance. You got to, oh no, there's complexities there. And then you have these people come along and they say, well, this is something that really irritates me. Like I identify them right away. Like, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. But I actually have more of a nuanced position on this than you do. Like, what the heck, man? I mean, what does that mean? Like, you have a superior knowledge and a special insight? Like, come on, yeah.
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 Because they're not going to listen to you. They've already got that special knowledge. You don't have it somehow. Okay, well, even though I've got the evidence, I'm pointing out the facts to you. Somehow I'm wrong. But they're not interested in evidence because, we live in a postmodern utopia. Your truth is whatever you want it to be. We're not interested in wrongdoing here. Remember that, Pastor? Just that we're all about love.
Yeah.
Mm.
Right.
So, I mean,
Sorry, I've just found that article
yes,
you were referencing.
that's the one, man.
Um,
Yeah, it's Truss. I was thinking of Theresa May, but it's Truss, Liz Truss.
yeah.
She's an amazing lady. I've come to respect her a lot.
Mm.
especially with the things she has to say. And look, I know we can get critical of she was in Parliament beforehand and she should have done something, should have known there was issues. Well, I guess you might have heard things, but when you think about it, they go, what it's easy to criticize from this side of the bench, right? Or the table.
Mm.
When you read what she says in here and you look at it, you go, well, she actually says some pretty heavy stuff. She was stopped from doing things and they booted her out before she could even get changes done. They cancelled her. And these are conservatives, right?
Mm.
Make that make sense.
Yeah. She says, I argued against all the net zero stuff. I argued against all the environmental regulation stuff, so ESG score, stuff like that. Um, and she said, officials in the Treasury, the unelected bureaucrats, are incredibly powerful. When I was Prime Minister, I wanted to restrain welfare spending. I wanted to get fracking. I thought that when or if I get to be PM, I can call the shots. Not so, he said. I then discovered actually I can't because there are people that are determined to continue with the same failed ideology. It sounds like an episode of Yes Minister to me. Um, that
Yeah.
the people behind the closed doors that we will never see, never hear from, they're controlling the narrative of what even good people want to do.
You guys remember Brad Hazard during COVID?
Mm.
The school teacher who was overseeing, the mandates and working with I forget her name, but the chief medical officer.
Mm.
And this guy was I mean, you don't hear from him now. But he's I think he's as bad as Fauci in some respects, and he should be before like, where's our we
Yeah.
wanted a royal commission into that.
Yeah.
What did Albanese and Labor do? Oh, we're just going to water it down, kind of. Well, just have a committee, and yeah, okay, committee, and that committee ended up saying nothing.
Mm.
It just well, okay, well, we did the best we could. Okay,
Even in New South Wales, I think it is recently, they've just decided now to welcome back cops that were unvaccinated during the COVID
yeah, I saw that.
because they're running short on cops. It's not because they want to make right on what they've done. They're just like, oh,
Yeah,
we'll, try and smooth things over so we can get a few more people in the job and make us look better. But even then, it's up to the cops themselves who were unvaccinated to reach out and be like, hey, I'm willing to come back, rather than the police force being like ringing them up or following up with them and being like, do you want to come back and help us out? So it's still it's frustrating that to this day this is still an issue, that we're still the consequences of COVID. We haven't learned from them. We have to some extent in the fact that there's been a couple of viruses over the past couple of years that the media have tried to make a big deal about, like the
yeah,
hantavirus, monkeypox. I
yeah.
think there's one or two other ones, and people are
Bird
like,
Bird flu
flu,
now.
yeah, bird
Yeah,
flu, yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Well,
um,
it's I always say a caveat, right? That's we should pay attention to what's going on. And Carl Bart, this is that Carl Bart thing, right? He read the news. He would often say, read the newspaper in one hand and the Bible in the other. And I think that's a good way to govern what we receive. In James, it says to receive the implanted word. We want to receive the implanted word. That's the truth, the gospel. And then we bring that to bear against everything that comes at us as a filter. So we test the spiritual man. The Bible says, New Testament, spiritual man tests all things, and we to let that govern our lives. And I guess that comes back to the things that I've been reading in J.C. Ryle's book, Holiness, no cross, no crown. Even the question, where is the cross in your Christianity? And I know that through COVID we hear this, oh, you've got to have you know, sacrificial love. What does that mean in this context? Um, get the vax. No thanks. Because I don't trust it. I haven't got enough information about it. All I've got the government is telling me it's safe and effective.
yeah.
Just like we hear abortion is healthcare, or love is love, or Islam is a religion of peace. I mean, come on now. You're like, okay, this is mass propaganda. This is manipulative propaganda, more to the point. And actually, you might want to bring that one up too if you want to look at it. Elon Musk last week, that hugely relevant when he was gaslit and then falsely accused of being and funding the far right, whatever that means, because there's no clear definition from the left about it. This is just this kind of boogeyman. Um, well, okay, well, they're anti-Semites. Well, are they? Well, who are the anti-Semites? Oh, this guy. No, they just criticized Israel. It doesn't make them Jew haters.
Yeah.
Let's get. We want to talk about nuance. Let's bring nuance in here. Let's bring the balance in. Come on now. Let's bring the balance in. So, yeah, I, it, the trajectory of the so-called woke right, who were originally the red pilled, that I'm not sure where that's going to go, right? But I can tell you now that if you criticize Israel because they're trigger happy, and there's a lot of people who'll be like, okay, look, yeah, we think they're trigger happy, but we still love them and we still think they've got a right to exist. But we're going to criticize where they've crossed the line, just like we would Trump. His vanity projects in the US. I think they're a distraction. Yeah. I don't think they're helping him. And I think that's part of his pride and I mean, look, I can be critical of him and I can be also, you know, uh, encouraging about what he's done. And he's done some amazing stuff too. But I'm just pointing out that there's a balance here. We talk about the far right and what the far right is. I think Musk really answers it well. It's ordinary people. It's everyday people. You, me. Like, I don't have a big platform. You guys are starting out. We're just trying to be faithful and honest and present and bring Christ into the culture to say, look, you're heading in the wrong direction. We're watching a train wreck in real life here. There's a precipice we're on, and the abyss is on the other side of it. And if we're not careful, so I don't want to be part of that group that future generations sit back. You did nothing. You said nothing. I don't want to be part of that. I certainly don't want to stand before my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and say, when He says, "When I was hungry, you never fed me. You didn't bring water to me." And I say, "Well, when were you hungry?" No. We can't manipulate our way into heaven. No. It's Christ or chaos. No cross, no crown.
No, 100%. We live for an audience of one at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the state needs to remember that it isn't God, and that the church's job is to remind it that it's not God. Not try and you're not going to pump it up, right? And say that, oh, they're anointed. I mean, you hear this a lot, right? And this is one of my pet peeves with the Pentecostals. All it takes is charm and charisma to get a promotion. That's it.
No.
They're anointed, brother. What? Because they can talk their way into your life and warm your heart with nice words. They have an appearance of godliness, but they're self-seeking. And I'm not saying that everyone who's talented and someone who's an extrovert or whatever you want to call that, um, isn't gifted. Surely they are. But when you start to put and bring in theology and start to, hey, this is what you do is deifying it. You're saying, well, you're giving it and pumping up something that I don't think God's actually part of. I think it's manipulation. I think it's spiritual abuse. And that's going to end in disaster for everyone and anyone who follows it, just like it would in a church if you've got a pastor whose only qualification is charm and charisma. That's going to end badly. And that you're going to find a lot of people with a lot of trauma walking away from that, who either give up on Christ or their faith or walk away from the gospel.
Yeah.
That's the danger of that. And that's what happened during COVID. You have people walking away from the church because they're like, hey, why aren't you standing up? Brothels and bottlers and the grogs. You can get your grog, you can watch your sport, you can build stuff in your house, do dodgy renovations. You can go to, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? All good. The government will feed that to you because that keeps you docile, keeps you compliant. The one thing that doesn't keep you compliant, the cross of Jesus Christ, because it challenges you to be better than you are. It transforms. Romans 12:2 will come back to that. The renewing of your mind, not the emptying of it. And that's where the uniqueness of Christ comes in through John 14:6. We don't have we're not Eastern mystics, where you empty your mind in meditation and transcend to a higher level. You're elevated through the blood and the body of Christ, the Eucharist, right? We elevated.
Mm.
One thing that Bart said, and he's not the most moral, I think, examples of Christians, but he loved the Lord and he's not perfect. But anyway, he said that the humiliation of God was the exaltation of humanity. And I think that if the state can remember that and be told that, we can start to maybe bring theology into a conversation with the ideology and say, look, hang on, there's corrections that have to be made here, especially the culture, the practice, the manipulation, the psychology, the behavioral psychology they use to get us to go along to get along. The threats, so Medicare, the scares that Labor throw around, and the save TAFE garbage. If you can recognize that as manipulation and lies, then you're already ahead. As far as reconstructing, which is what ARC was all about this year, reconstructing the West, you're already reconstructing your life around the truth and walking away from that indoctrination, that programming, that manipulative propaganda that Elon Musk called out last week in a powerful way in support of Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain. I think he's right.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we definitely need more voices stepping up to say what we've commonly known to be the truth. It's I remember I think it's been more than a month now that someone wanted to get me fired because of my opinions on abortion. Um, and I think someone's like told me, it's very brave of you. I'm inspired by him. Like, yeah, I hope you're inspired to sort of do it yourself because it to some extent it can get easy for me or someone in our sort of circles because we're in this space all the time. Whereas someone else, where the average person, it's not easy because it's not a regular thing that they have to go through. And that's sort of what we need a bit more of. It can't just be one or two people standing up. Yeah, even though that's great. We've got to see um, a congregation of people standing up for truth everywhere they go, preaching the truth in the public sphere, not just keeping their faith private, which is sort of a circle back to where we started.
Exactly right. Yeah. The secular versus sacred.
Yeah.
Look at anyone who speaks truth is going to make people uncomfortable, especially people in that environment who aren't telling the truth.
Yeah.
And they're going to be avoided. They're going to be pariahs. This is why you have narcissists who are celebrated as paragons of virtue, while the guys who are calling them out are derided as, troublemakers. I'm sure Keith Green would have been called a troublemaker. John the Baptist was. I mean, the dude lost his head, right?
Yeah.
Because he challenged the state. Yeah. I mean, what an example. Do we have to look forward to that? Look at what is happening in Egypt and even in Pakistan. The blasphemy laws. You go to even India, the blasphemy laws there. Look at we have hate speech laws here are pretty much the same thing, just same devil, different name. There's some horrific stories of people who are being imprisoned, husbands and wives. What? Because they were set up. Evidence was manufactured. And it was easy to do because the laws were easily abused. And that's where I think, Riley, if you're talking about dictatorship, that's where I think we're heading. Those laws, those hate speech laws. Because you're starting to mess with thought. You're starting to, and it comes back to that subjectivism, the divine right, the abuse of the divine right of the individual, or even the elevation of that. Is there a divine right of the individual? Is there a divine right of the state? These are the questions I think church needs to answer and needs to step up and talk about.
Yeah, that's really good. I think
Mm.
we'll start to wrap up now. Did you have any final thoughts, Rod, as we come to sort of towards the end?
Yeah, I guess what I'll quote is John Stott, I suppose, because I love. There's a statement in his contemporary Christianity that he wrote. Um, the the church belongs in the marketplace, not the museum. But John Stott was an Anglican, and I think he'd be heartbroken to see where it's gone now. But he was an ardent Anglican. He believed that the structure was perfect. You couldn't get a better liturgical structure. You couldn't get a better. And look, I look at the prayer book, a Common Book of Prayer, and I think, wow, you see this even today. You see sometimes the movies will put it in the historical dramas and stuff. We use the prayer at sea, um, um, and that's part of that. The Common Book of Prayer. It's a special thing. It's definitely a gift to the church as a whole, and so that quote from John Stott definitely be a good one to finish on. I think he also would celebrate that no cross, no crown, no Christ, no kingdom sentiment of J.C. Ryle, where he would assert that self-salvation is not possible, so that the state cannot save itself. The state needs God just as much as the church does. The Christ being the head of the church, us, body of Christ. The state still comes under that, two kingdoms. God is God, we are not. And if we're going to have good government, then that government needs to reflect a good God. They can't just preach love. It needs to know where that love comes from and what defines that love. The state can't define that love, and it shouldn't be defining that love, nor should it be defining truth. Fuck the safety commissioner. Yeah. Like ultimately, this is something that Stott says too, that the followers of Jesus Christ are realists, not utopians. So I think we need to remind ourselves of that. And Christians in politics or in the public arena, such as yourselves, would do well to remember that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, and humility wins. And that goes way back to even the desert forebears, the monks. They understood humility far greater than we ever will. That deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me in Luke 9, Jesus' assertion, follow me. So Christianity belongs in the marketplace, not the museum. And we need to not compromise if you seek a sensitive, doctrine or policies, but to just preach the gospel and let the Holy Spirit evangelize, let the Holy Spirit transform hearts and renew. Because the armor of God, Christ, put him on, the state puts him on. There's success in that. There's protection in that, and then there's fruit that comes from that. John 15. And that's where the West is blessed by. That's what, I mean, look, he said, Riley said you're not that interested in Greek mythology. I think it was Riley.
No, that was me. Sorry.
Was it John?
Yeah, John. Yeah.
I would encourage you to have a look at some of it, because when you look at Sisyphus, for example, who is condemned to push a rock up a hill, that's Marxism, that's socialism. And when you get someone who comes to this and preaches this idea of, equity, you got to hear the word envy, because it's not about equity. It's not about equality, ultimately. It's about pushing this politics of grievance, taking and stealing from someone because they don't like the fact that you've been successful. So Sisyphus, he's pushing this rock up and down, and that's communism. It's been tried, it's failed. But they still keep reviving it. They want you to keep pushing that rock up and down the hill, and they'll make you do it like Sisyphus. So there's also Scylla and Charybdis, you know, the whirlpool and I think it's the tornado with the sirens, I think. But yeah, I'd have to refresh my memory there. But Scylla and Charybdis, you've got to navigate between those two. You know, there's a moral in that. There's wisdom in that you can mine. So yeah, don't, because the West isn't just, and it's true to say the West isn't just built on the rock of Christ, but also is influenced and has taken from some of the wisdom of the Greek philosophers, even Rome. You see that in the US, the structures over there. But yeah, look, yeah, I'd encourage you guys to look into those and you see where, okay, see where go from there. Definitely don't be like Lot and you know linger there, but just footnote it. Okay, that's interesting. And then how do I apply that to here? And can I speak that into society and into culture? And how does that inform this? Because it does bring a colorful way to help understand some of the more moral complexities that we have. Um, so you could say that, for example, if you know apply Scylla and Charybdis, you've got Islamism and Marxism on one side, Islamism on the other. How do we navigate the two? Because you're going to end up with Islamification if you don't. Global conquest of Marxism, communism, global communism. You know, recognizing too that even the fables come into play. You know, the scorpion and the frog, and how I've often said that, excuse me, the Marxist and the woke Marxian paradigm, which includes critical race theory, um, DEI, the whole thing. And it's all manufactured by people who are posing as the oppressed, but they're actually the oppressed. So the oppressors are masquerading as the oppressed. And that I think if you can grab a hold of that and go, well, okay, you know, well, I can see that and how that's working. I can then navigate that. I cannot be the scorpion giving the frog a ride, and then the scorpion stings the frog, and the frog says, "Why did you do that? What's in my nature?" Yeah. And that doesn't go from the state or ideology. It also is within ourselves. I mean, we can look at that and go, well, where am I compromising there with that? And how does that enlighten how does that build on my understanding of scripture? And it's helpful. So yeah, don't outrightly reject. It's true. What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? Um, but at the same time, I think it's wise to be well read in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I thought one thing is that when I saw the Odyssey today, um, and there was the scene where um the ship they were passing Odysseus, he was leading his men in the ship, that it was after the whirlpool, and it was past that uh tidal rock area where the song of, I forget what the song is called, um but that's going on, and the men had to put wax in the ear so they wouldn't hear it. And the way it was sort of described was sort of like it's sort of that pleasurable itch that you get that you want to scratch so hard. And that if you listen to the song, it sort of overtakes you in that regard. That's the way I sort of understood how they were describing it. And I thought that was really interesting in the way that they described it. And the way they showed it was one guy, he took the wax out of his ears and he had this uh, unstoppable urge to jump off the boat and to get to the rocks where these, it looked like, I didn't look long, but it looked like there were naked women there, to fulfill his urge to do what he liked. And you see that sort of picture in the story of Cain and Abel, where uh, God was pleased with Abel's sacrifice, but not Cain's. And Cain was planning in his heart to do something to Abel. And God, I forget the exact quote, but God said something to the effect of, sin wants to have a hold of you. You've got to stop it. You've got to push back. You've got to take control. and in the end he didn't. So I can sort of see what you're saying there, in that regard, that you can't sort of just write off everything. I think that's a really good point. But yeah,
Yeah,
right.
look, there's an old saying, eat the fish, spit out the bones, right?
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
that comes into play.
definitely. Right?
This is going to be a rabbit hole situation, but what you said just it clicked. It's like the cave allegory, right?
Mm,
It's always that unknowingness, and I think that it's all connecting now with the Greek, the philosophy, and then yeah, no. Anyway, yeah. So overall, it's been a fantastic conversation and amazing quotes. I love the variety and diversity of quotes that you've used, Rod. It's
yes, mate.
fantastic. Um, and yeah, absolutely fascinating. And where we're going to go as a society, we've talked about it. It's the direction is a dictatorial direction, but the power, I do believe that um, we have to have faith in Christ. Um, and it's up to us, as we've just discussed, it's up to us, it's up to the church. And I think this is a critical turning point that that we've arrived at. So yeah.
Yeah, no,
Definitely a crossroads for sure.
definitely. We're in a civilizational moment, so we've got to step up or
Mm.
we'll be crushed.
Yep.
But yeah, it's been a great conversation.
Thanks for
Um,
having me, guys.
yeah, it's been great having you, Rod,
Yeah.
and especially so short notice. We really appreciate you
It's all
coming
right,
on.
mate. Glad to help.
Yeah, it's been a very thought-provoking and sober conversation. So please, guys, if you're watching, please make sure to share it around as much as possible. And you can check out stuff that Rod writes about on the Daily Declaration, Cauldron Pool, and said you also write on the Spectator. You've written for as well.
Yeah, some of it goes up, depending on the. It's an interesting. It's great to see that. I guess we look at the secular and sacred of that. It's really great that they put up
Mm.
content. Mark Powell gets some stuff up there, pastor in Tasmania. It's good that they do that, and they put
Yeah.
the some Christian content up. Um, that's again, we'll talk. I guess you could talk about tolerance and go into that, but yeah, it's good to see that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then you can also find him on Instagram, Facebook, and X. And when I publish on Spotify, it's already on YouTube. But when I pop it up there, I'll put all the links down there so you guys can find that easily. But yeah, Rod, thank you so much for being on
All
the
right,
show.
thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And if you guys want to find out more about the Young Conservatives for Christ, just go to youngconservativeforchrist.com and you can find all the links in the description below. So thank you for watching and we'll catch you next time.
God bless.
Mm, This one, no, not that one. Oh, there it is. And we're out. Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, Rod. We